Chris, is Tennessee as good as what they showed us on Saturday night against NC State?
I think they are. Yeah, I think Tennessee's for real. Now, I'm not saying they're going to go undefeated or win the SEC, but no, I had them as a college football playoff team before the season. I had them at 10-2, locking in their spot in the playoff, and I feel really confident about that pick. And you know what's crazy, Mark? I actually had them 10-2 with a loss to Oklahoma. So if those two teams played this week, I would be taking the Volunteers. There's no question. So I think Tennessee is absolutely a 10 or 11 win team. I think they've got the makings of that. They've got some tests down the road. Alabama will come to town. They're going to have to go to Georgia along with the rest of the SEC slate. Florida is never an easy game for them, even with what Florida is this year. But no, Tennessee's for real. I mean, they're find the holes. You know, I mean, I think secondary will probably continue to be the question for them, but they're so good in the front seven defensively. That's where my optimism came, Mark. We knew they'd be good offensively, right? I mean, Nico is the right trigger man for Josh Heupel. The offensive line is stout. The running back room is stout. The wide receiver room is full of electric playmakers. So, you know, they've got everything on the offensive side you need. And I think what's scary is we probably haven't even seen – I know we haven't seen the best version of Nico Iamaleava. But on the defensive side, that front seven was why I was really, really excited about Tennessee and optimistic about them. And, I mean, the way they just throttled NC State, Mark. I mean, was NC State a little bit overrated? How does NC State stack up to some of the SEC competition they'll see? I mean, that's debatable, but I think NC State's a quality team, and they made them look totally incompetent. So, yeah, Josh Heupel and company, they're a force to be reckoned with. And again, I feel really, really good about my pick in the preseason. They'll be in the college football playoff.
Chris, I'm right there with you because we may see NC State step into the ACC and be ultra competitive and possibly compete for a championship. Dave Doran typically has them at 8-4, 9-3 in that range. And I know they struggled against Western Carolina, but with Grayson McCall at the controls, I would not be surprised if they had a decent season like they do each and every year. And for Tennessee just to completely just drag them around the field, and you just sized up the offense. The offense could be the best in the nation when it's all said and done as Nico continues to improve and all those weapons all over the place. And they may have 2025's number one pick in the NFL draft, James Pierce, leading that defense. What do you make of Bama going to Wisconsin? That's one of those interesting non-conference matchups. I don't know if Wisconsin's up to it, but of course, Bama rolled in week one. And it's only Western Kentucky, but they don't typically lose by 60 points. So that was ultra impressive. But then they messed around with South Florida for a second consecutive year before they kicked it into gear.
Yeah, I don't think any Bama fans want to see South Florida on the schedule ever again, Mark. Those games have just been anything but comfortable. Bama looked really average for three quarters and looked like one of the best teams in the country in the fourth quarter, the way they exploded and pulled away in that game. I do have Alabama winning this game. I mean, listen, I think – you know, it'll be interesting. Kalen DeBoer's first road game. I don't think Wisconsin has the pieces to hang around and make this a fourth quarter game. I think the crowd will be raucous. We know what to expect from Camp Randall. I don't really trust Tyler Van Dyke all that much. You know, Phil Longo's offense there, the quote unquote air raid, if you will. You know, I think for Alabama, I'm curious to see the run game with Justin Haynes and Jam Miller. And I thought, you know, seeing the run game kind of come together, the offensive line get a push. I mean, they had their moments where they weren't great, but and their physicality will be important in this game, obviously, as it is each time you play somebody from the Big Ten. But I think Alabama pulls away in this one late. I've got them winning this game by 2 scores, 14 points. I don't know that they cover. I won't be surprised if Wisconsin covers in this game. But I do have Alabama winning. I think, you know, the first road test of the Kalen DeBoer era will go well. But listen, you got to avoid those self-inflicted wounds. I mean, double-digit penalties again, Mark, turnovers. You cannot do that in Madison. You go on the road and do that. You're going to be in a fourth quarter fight. And, you know, you get to that point, Wisconsin's not going to know they're not supposed to win the football game, right? So, you know, things could go sideways, but I think Bama will clean it up. I think they'll play a much more clean game, and I think they will get the win.
Chris Phillips, SEC Unfiltered, a destination for all of you to track the SEC top to bottom. And while Florida was an embarrassment against Miami in week one in what was supposed to be a close game, I think that the embarrassment for this conference is Auburn's performance last week against Cal. Not just from a football standpoint, but from the standpoint that we've got this Cal school where we think of Cal being more concerned with a lot of other things besides football, having a dwindling, non-existent fan base, playing in front of nobody on the West Coast, and now having to play in this, out of place league where they're traveling across the country constantly to play their games. And they show up at what's supposed to be one of the most difficult places to play in all of college football against an Auburn team that got a lot of buzz during the offseason as, wow, this could be Hugh Freeze' second year, gets the passing game together, and they break through. And Cal beat them by a touchdown, but I don't even know if the game was that close.
It wasn't. And I'll tell you this, Payton Thorne, I can't for the life of me, Mark, understand why Hugh Freeze has hitched his wagon to Payton Thorne. I think it is very obvious right now what needs to be done. At some point, you just know what you have, Mark. And I'm not saying that Payton Thorne is going to be as bad as he was Saturday against Cal the entire season, but that's his floor. And I think what's scary, Mark, is to know that each Saturday you might get that version of him. And it's going to hold Auburn back from reaching their ceiling this season. So, listen, they've got New Mexico this week. They're going to win the football game, but I'll be curious, do we see Hank Brown? Do we see Hugh Freeze at minimum get Hank Brown in the football game, get him ready for SEC play? Because I don't think just hitching the wagon to Payton Thorne and riding him out is the way to go. 4 interceptions in the game against Cal. There were other problems defensively. I thought they were a little bit sloppy, obviously in the open field tackling, what have you, but nobody, Mark, and I mean nobody, saw that coming. I talked to Auburn people last week. They scoffed at the idea they could lose that game. Really, truly. The conversation was, will they cover? The conversation was never, is Auburn going to win? So, very humbling for the Tigers, for sure. It's funny, Mark, in the preseason, I picked Arkansas to beat Auburn in Jordan-Hare, and I was labeled a crazy person for that. And if those two teams played this week, and maybe when we talk about that game next week, I think there's going to be some out there that are picking the Hogs. So, there wasn't a more disappointing team, arguably in all of college football, than Auburn in week 2. A team with such high expectations. Many were expecting 8+ wins. And, now you find yourself behind the 8 ball and you've got a quarterback I don't know that this fan base trusts. And I don't blame them because I don't trust Payton Thorne either.
This was such a deep quarterback class in the transfer portal. Mm-hmm. And with these coaches making so much money, Hugh Freeze included, that's one of the things that they are paid to do, is to be able to evaluate their quarterback room and say, we've got the guy here, or we need to go get the guy. And I think Michigan missed it. Clemson may have missed it, although that's not what they do, of course, go to the transfer portal. And Auburn missed it in regards to looking at the likes of Cam Ward, KJ Jefferson, Will Rogers, all sorts of guys, Dylan Gabriel, Will Howard, tons of guys switched teams, and Auburn just stayed pat.
Yeah, it just, again, I heard a lot of people say this offseason, Mark, that Auburn was more than a quarterback away. Well, I understand that. You're more than a quarterback away from competing for the college football playoff. You're maybe not more than a quarterback away from competing for 8 or 9 wins. And every win matters, year 2 of Hugh Freeze's tenure. So I, for the life of me, don't understand it. It was a risk, obviously, by Hugh Freeze. He's taken over the offense this year, and you felt like, well, if there's anybody that can get the most out of this kid, it's going to be Hugh Freeze. And the way they upgraded, Mark, the wide receiver position, it kind of made you feel like that maybe there was hope there. But at some point, man, people show you who they are, and it's your job to believe them when they show you. And Payton Thorne has shown you who he is. So there were options out there. I don't know why they didn't make any moves and go out and get a quarterback, and they're kind of having to pay for it right now.
All right, Chris, appreciate you being here as always. Everybody catch Chris at SEC Unfiltered. Chris, thanks so much.
Yeah, appreciate you having me, man. It's always a pleasure anytime. I really love doing this, and looking forward to another entertaining weekend of SEC and college football for sure.